Canada's fighter jet choice isn't about planes, it's about power, control, and whether Ottawa answers to its people or to Washington. Canada's next fighter jet choice is not about speed or stealth, it is about who controls Canadian skies. Tonight, we enter a quiet battlefield where contracts replace missiles, software replaces pilots, and sovereignty is the real prize. Ottawa signed for the F-35, then hesitated. Washington noticed. Stockholm waited. And behind closed doors, power brokers began to move. This story is not about metal and engines. It is about data, dependence, and decisions that shape decades. When a nation cannot modify its own weapons, it does not fully own them. And when allies apply pressure, even friends can become leverage. For 50 years, the Royal Canadian Air Force flew CF-18 Hornets. By 2017, they were aging, expensive, and limited against modern threats. Ottawa launched the Future Fighter Capability Project to replace them with 88 next-generation jets. After years of trials, simulations, and political debate, Canada selected the F-35 inches 2022. The initial price was about 19 billion Canadian dollars, then costs surged. By 2024, the estimate passed 27 billion, a jump of nearly 50%. At the same time, trade tensions with Washington grew. Quietly, Ottawa began to re-examine its decision. The question became bigger than airplanes and contracts alone. Sweden's Gripen E entered the conversation as an alternative. On paper, it looked smaller, cheaper, and simpler. But its real difference was not speed or weapons, it was ownership. Gripen uses an open architecture system. That means the buyer can change software, integrate weapons, and modify systems without asking another government. For Canada, this meant something radical: control. Saab even offered to assemble jets in Halifax and build technology centers across the country. Canada would not just buy aircraft, it would gain access to the technology that powers them. That promise changed how Ottawa viewed its options completely and publicly. But fighter jets are never just machines. They shape alliances, economies, and power balances. Buying the F-35 ties Canada deeply into American systems, supply chains, and data networks. Every major update requires approval from Washington. Every key part depends on factories in the United States. Gripen offers a different path: more local control, easier maintenance, and independence in software. For a country with vast territory, Arctic bases, and extreme weather, this matters. The question became whether Canada wanted maximum integration with allies or maximum control over its own defense future and strategic identity as a sovereign state globally today alone. Behind the scenes, pressure began to rise. American officials warned that changing jets could affect cooperation inside NORAD. Interoperability, they said, depends on shared systems and shared data. Choosing Gripen might weaken that bond. At the same time, Canadian leaders spoke about autonomy, jobs, and technology transfer. Costs for the F-35 kept climbing, delivery schedules slipped, infrastructure bills grew. Ottawa faced a dilemma: stay aligned and dependent, or shift course and risk angering its closest ally. The decision stopped being technical. It became political, economic, and deeply strategic. Every choice now carried consequences far beyond fighter jets alone anymore globally. This is where our story begins. Not with engines, but with influence. Not with wings, but with power. Over the next chapters, we will break down the technology, the money, and the politics behind Canada's Gripen dilemma. We will follow supply chains, software codes, and diplomatic signals. We will ask who benefits, who loses, and who truly decides. Because in modern warfare, control of data is as important as control of airspace. And in this decision, Canada is not just choosing a jet, it is choosing how much of its future it truly owns starting tonight under pressure from allies. To understand why the Gripen debate shook Ottawa, we must examine the machines themselves. The F-35 is a fifth-generation stealth fighter built around sensor fusion, data sharing, and networked warfare. Its radar, infrared systems, and electronic warfare suites feed a central computer that builds a single picture of the battlefield. Pilots see threats before they see targets. Through secure links, F-35 seconds talk to ships, drones, satellites, and ground units. In theory, this makes the jet not just a fighter, but a flying command node. But this power depends on software control. The F-35's core code is owned by the United States government and managed through Lockheed Martin. Every major update passes through American approval chains, weapon integration, electronic warfare changes, and even some maintenance software require access to systems controlled in the United States. Canada can fly the jet, but it cannot fully rewrite it. That difference matters when politics shift or supply chains break. The Gripen E was designed with a different philosophy. Saab built it around open architecture. Buyers can write their own mission software, integrate domestic weapons, and modify sensors without asking Stockholm. This is not about pride, it is about speed. In a crisis, waiting months for foreign approval can mean losing relevance. Gripen trades extreme stealth for flexibility, ease of maintenance, and rapid modification. Maintenance is where these philosophies clash hardest. According to public estimates, the F-35 can cost over $35,000 per flight hour. Much of this comes from specialized parts, stealth coatings, and complex logistics chains. Parts often travel between multiple countries before reaching squadrons. A single missing component can ground an aircraft for weeks or months. In contrast, Gripen was designed for dispersed operations. Swedish doctrine assumed highways could become runways. Crews could service jets with simple tools in cold, remote locations. Costs per flight hour are estimated near $8,000. Geography makes this difference strategic for Canada. 2/3 of Canadian territory lies in extreme northern climates. Bases are far apart. Weather is brutal. Infrastructure is expensive. The F-35 needs smooth runways, heated hangars, and strict security environments for its stealth skin. Each new base requires major investment. Gripen can operate from rough surfaces, shorter runways, and colder environments with fewer upgrades. Over decades, these differences translate into billions. Now layer geopolitics on top of engineering. The F-35 program is not just an aircraft project, it is an alliance system. The United States uses it to bind partners into shared logistics, training, and intelligence networks. When countries fly the same jet, they share data standards, mission planning tools, and battlefield pictures. This makes coalition warfare smoother, but also increases dependence on American infrastructure. Industry and economics add another layer. Saab offered to build assembly lines and technology centers in Canada. That means engineers, programmers, and technicians trained at home. It also means domestic control over parts of the supply chain. Lockheed Martin's F-35 offsets exist, but core technologies remain American. Canadian firms often produce secondary components rather than key systems. Over time, this shapes what skills a country develops. Security planners also look at readiness. Reports from the United States have shown that F-35 seconds struggle to meet mission-ready targets due to parts shortages and software delays. Finally, there is data. Modern fighters collect enormous intelligence, radar tracks, electronic signals, infrared images. Who stores that data, who can analyze it, and who can share it determines power. With the F-35, much of that data flows through American-controlled systems. With Gripen, Canada could build more independent data paths. In an age where information is a weapon, this choice defines strategic freedom. So the debate is not F-35 versus Gripen as airplanes. It is network versus autonomy, integration versus control, alliance, comfort versus national flexibility. Canada must decide what kind of military future it wants before it chooses what wings will carry it. As costs rose and schedules slipped, pressure began moving quietly through diplomatic and industrial channels. Lobbyists visited Ottawa. Defense firms increased outreach. Embassies started speaking less in public and more in private. Fighter jets became bargaining chips in a much larger game involving trade, intelligence, and political alignment. According to defense officials, early F-35 negotiations assumed stable relations with Washington. But global politics changed. Tariff threats returned. Supply chains fractured after pandemics and wars. Suddenly, dependence looked risky. Ottawa asked a dangerous question. What happens if access to software updates, spare parts, or data links becomes conditional during a crisis? This fear is not theoretical. In several past conflicts, allies delayed or restricted arms support when political disagreements emerged. Modern systems are even easier to control remotely through software licensing and encrypted updates. A jet without code is only metal. If access is limited, combat power fades quickly. This is why ownership became the core of Canada's debate. Sweden understood this pressure well. Saab's strategy was not to outgun the F-35, but to outmaneuver it politically. By offering local assembly, technology transfer, and software freedom, Saab appealed to Canada's fear of dependency. Behind the scenes, Swedish diplomats framed Gripen as a sovereignty tool, not just a weapon. Every meeting emphasized independence, Arctic suitability, and long-term cost control. Washington responded differently. American officials stressed alliance unity. NORAD officials warned about interoperability gaps. Intelligence officers spoke about shared sensor networks and joint threat pictures. Their message was subtle but firm. Choosing differently could weaken trust. And in intelligence, trust is currency. At the same time, industrial pressure increased. Lockheed Martin reminded Ottawa that Canadian firms already earned billions through the F-35 program, but these contracts were not guaranteed. Reducing the order could shrink future work. Jobs, factories, and regional economies became part of the decision matrix. Inside Canada's military, opinion quietly split. Some pilots favored the F-35 for its stealth and sensors. Others admired Gripen's toughness and simplicity. Engineers worried about long-term maintenance access. Planners worried about Arctic coverage. Intelligence officers worried about data sovereignty. Every group saw the problem from its own angle, and no angle solved everything. Then came the intelligence question few wanted to discuss publicly. Modern jets do not just fight, they spy. Their sensors map enemy radars, intercept communications, and build electronic order of battle libraries. Where that data is stored, who can access it, and who can share it determines strategic power. With the F-35, much of this data is processed through American systems. That gives the United States enormous visibility across allied operations. For Canada, this offers protection, but also exposure. Some analysts asked whether a hybrid solution could balance these risks. A small fleet of F-35 seconds could maintain interoperability for joint missions. A larger fleet of Gripens could handle domestic patrols, Arctic defense, and independent operations. This would reduce dependence while preserving alliance ties, but it would also complicate logistics and training. Behind public debates, informal networks worked quietly. Retired officers spoke to politicians. Industry veterans advised ministers. Think tanks published reports highlighting sovereignty risks. Media leaks hinted that Ottawa was reconsidering its path. Each leak tested reactions in Washington and Stockholm. Then, a former Canadian Air Force commander made a rare public statement. He compared reliance on foreign support to a treaty promise that might fail when most needed. His words cut deep. They suggested that even allies might hesitate under pressure. For a military built on partnership, this was a dangerous thought. Supporters of the F-35 dismissed such warnings as alarmist, but critics answered that allies help only when interests align in major crises. As Ottawa weighs its options, the choice now reaches beyond procurement into identity. Canada must decide what kind of power it wants to be in a world where alliances shift and technology locks nations together as tightly as treaties. The F-35 path promises seamless integration with the United States and NATO, access to the most advanced stealth network ever built, and political comfort inside the Western security system. It also carries dependence on foreign code, foreign supply chains, and foreign permission. The Gripen path promises control, adaptability, and domestic industry, but at the cost of friction with Washington and uncertainty inside alliance structures. Neither option is safe. Security always trades one risk for another. What matters is which risk Canada is willing to live with for decades. If Ottawa stays with the F-35, it gains unmatched sensor fusion, deep intelligence sharing, and coalition dominance in high-end warfare. But it also accepts that its most advanced weapons can be influenced by political decisions made elsewhere. In moments of crisis, access to software, parts, and data could become bargaining tools. If Ottawa pivots toward Gripen, it gains freedom of modification, faster adaptation to Arctic conditions, and the ability to grow its own aerospace expertise. But it also risks weakening interoperability with allies at a time when shared threats from great power competition to long-range missiles and cyber warfare are rising. Independence brings responsibility. Canada would have to fund, secure, and manage more of its own defense ecosystem. This debate also sends a message to the world. If Canada chooses sovereignty over integration, smaller nations will watch closely. Many states face the same dilemma: buy into big alliance systems and lose some control, or build national capability and risk isolation. Canada's decision could become a case study for middle powers navigating between giants. The world will measure that choice. There is also an economic future at stake. Aerospace industries create long chains of knowledge: engineers, coders, materials scientists, and logistics planners. The path Canada chooses will shape what skills its next generation develops. Will it become a node inside a massive American-led system, or a builder of its own specialized capabilities? Intelligence agencies are watching closely. Fighter jets today are not just fighters, they are collectors. They see beyond borders, intercept signals, and map electronic environments. Who owns that data, who analyzes it, and who decides how it is shared defines modern power. Canada must decide whether it wants that power primarily mediated through an ally or primarily managed at home. In the coming years, Ottawa may announce a compromise, a mixed fleet, balancing integration and independence. Or it may commit fully to one path and accept its consequences. Either way, the age when fighter purchases were simple technical choices is over. Every jet now carries a political code, an economic future, and a strategic philosophy. What began as a procurement review has become a mirror. It reflects Canada's fear of losing control, its desire for partnership, and its uncertainty in a world where power is increasingly digital, invisible, and conditional. The sky over Canada will look the same to most citizens, but the forces that govern who controls that sky will change everything beneath it. In the end, this is not a story about planes. It is a story about how nations survive in a world where weapons think, data rules, and independence has a price. Canada stands where many countries will soon stand, between comfort and control, between safety and sovereignty. The jet it chooses will not just defend its borders, it will define how freely it can act when the next crisis arrives. Canada's fighter decision will echo for decades, shaping alliances, industries, and control of the skies. This choice is not about jets, it is about sovereignty in an age of code and power. If you value analysis of global security, like, share, and subscribe. Tell us what path Canada should take now.